Hello again, everybody. This is Derek, and I am coming at you with another wargaming and miniature video. In today's video, we're going to continue on with our MeG boot camp. And in today's MeG boot camp, we're going to chapter 9.7, which is routes and pursuits. With enough time, we'll actually do 9.8 as well, which is KaB tests and recovering wounds. Let's talk about routes and pursuits. Before we even get into the rules, I just want to have a little anecdote. There are some games, not this one, but there are some games where you fight or you shoot at an enemy, they take a number of wounds, and when the wounds get to a certain point, the unit breaks, and you might mark it with like a yellow pipe cleaner or something, and then that unit falls back like a number of inches, and then it sits there on the table, and your general can run over there and with a couple of morale checks or morale rolls, you can get that unit back into the fight, and then it'll move forward, and then when it takes more wounds, it breaks again. Maybe it's destroyed when it loses too many wounds. That's not this game. There is no rallying. There is no recovering from route. Okay. A, break points. Okay. It's real easy to calculate a unit's break point. It's the same across all armies. UGs can be broken in the following three ways: suffering casualties from shooting, suffering casualties from combat, suffering casualties from killing a base. Basically, suffering casualties from any method. Okay, base loss represents, so by pulling a base off of the table, it represents kills, wounds, degradation of morale, and the breakdown of the unit cohesion. In all formats, UG break immediately when their losses reach a certain number. We've already gone over this, I think, in the very first video, maybe the second video. When more than half of a tug, even if flexible, because flexible sometimes can do skirmishing. So half of a tug, more than half, not half, more than half. With a SUG, okay, you noticed I put a tug and a SUG on the table. A SUG, more than 1/3 casualties. So here's the examples. This has got 6 bases. So if you lose 3 bases, it doesn't break. But if it loses 3 bases and gets 1 additional wound, it's broken. The SUG. So a 9 base SUG would break if it loses 3 bases and a wound, because just 3 bases is 1/3. If it started as an 8 base SUG, 3 bases would be more than 1/3, so it would be broken if it loses 3 bases. But if it's a 9 base, then it would require 3 bases and an additional wound. That's all pretty straightforward. The army, in all formats, an army breaks immediately if it ever loses 1/2 or more of its tugs. Note that a camp is not a tug, but a sacked camp counts as one tug. Troops that are broken stop fighting immediately, but if they have been broken in the shooting phase, they complete any of their shooting, because shooting is simultaneous. They then cause KaB tests and make a route move in subphase 2.8 or 3.2 or 5.3, depending on the phase in which they break. KaB test ranges are always measured to the bases that the routers had in place at the beginning of the phase in which they break. So occasionally you'll need to put a base back to check distances. Okay, so let's say you got a unit deployed like this, and this unit gets eliminated and it causes them to break. I'm exaggerating, but let's say it causes them to break. Well, you don't measure the sphere of influence from the current location. You measure it from there, right? You'll measure it from where the bases were before they broke. So what they're saying is, if you need to, put the base back temporarily just to see what those ranges are. Okay, route moves. When called upon to make a route move, the order rarely matters. But if it does, then as usual, the active player chooses the first to be done, then the inactive, and so on. Normally, you'll just do them all. An UG with enemy in contact with two or more to front, flank, or rear does not route and is destroyed on the spot. So, if you got a unit fighting on two sides, front, flank, or rear, as long as it's two or more of those, it doesn't route, it just gets destroyed immediately. At that point, the opponent, the person winning, gets the option to pursue directly ahead, even though there's nothing to pursue. So the unit's blown up, and if you want to pursue straight ahead, you're welcome to do so. Because even though they're blown up, there's still a bunch of people that aren't fighting anymore. They're throwing their shield to the ground and they're running for the hills, and the pursuit is kind of like those guys chasing them down. Otherwise, if you're not contacted on two or more sides, the routing UG makes a single route move only and are removed from the table after pursuits. There is no rallying of troops who are broken during a game. Now, in the campaign game, there might be rallying to bring units back into your campaign, etc. Routing UGs make a move with the variable move distance, wheel or turn as necessary to get as far from the enemy in contact as possible in the following direction. Measuring distance from the starting position when wheeling and the position after turning, if turning. If routing, when in combat, route directly away from the enemy in front edge combat with it. If there are multiple UGs in contact with the routers, the owning player chooses which enemy to route away from. If routing from shooting, but not in combat, route directly away from the shooters. If there are multiple UGs shooting at the routers, the owning player chooses which to route away from. So, if I got a unit here and a unit there, and they're both shooting, and remember, shooting is simultaneous, and let's say that routes them, now they can route this direction or they can route this direction. If routing due to a KaB test, for some reason you had to kill a base and you're not in combat, then route directly towards your own table edge. Routers do not deviate at all from this path, other than being able to take advantage of the universal 1/2 base width shift. If they meet friends, they pass through them as per the rules for passing through friends, causing KaB tests where appropriate. Okay, so I've got an example here that I'm going to show. We've got some legionaries in 3 tugs right here. We got, and then we've got some, looks like some German Gaul in armor right there. Okay. Number 1, 2 Romans. Yeah, okay. So this was a 4 base tug. It's lost 2 bases and 1 wound. So it is broken. And it's going to route back in this direction. Just know they're going to be routing. Number 2. The first tug is also only 2 bases with a wound. Right? So because they're broken, they're going to be routing as well. The first tug rolls a 3 on the variable movement distance and bursts through the Roman second line. So the variable move distance is far enough for them to go through them or into them, causing a KaB test. As these are superior legionnaires, it's a green KaB test, and so they roll a die. That means that your KaB test is a die roll. They roll a skull, killing a base. And then you just remove the routers and might as well remove the base. So they routed through them, causing a KaB test. We rolled the KaB test. Whatever shows up on the KaB test kills a base. Well, if it's a skull, it kills a base. And boom, done. The second tug rolls a 1 for variable move distance and only routes 1 base width, avoiding another burst through. So they route, but then they're still picked up because they didn't burst through that second line. Okay. Before I pick them up, remember, they routed 1 base width. Now, the Gauls pursue. Pursuers don't roll variable move. They move whatever they normally could move, which would normally be 3 base widths for these guys. But because they're going to contact these after 1 base width, they have to stop. So these guys run up 1 base width, stop. Well, everybody would stop, and then you would remove them. Basically preventing them from advancing the full 3 base widths. Pursuit moves. Here we go. UGs do not pursue if they are still in contact with enemy troops So if only one of these guys broke and the other one was still in place, there would be no pursuit move. They would just sit there continuing to fight the other UG that they were in contact with. UGs that were fighting only as supporting files have an option to pursue if the troops they were supporting have done so. So if these were two UGs, let's say, and this unit was here, right? So this UG is supporting this. If this guy breaks, he will pursue, and this guy has the option to pursue. UGs that destroyed opponents that were fighting in two or more front, flank, or rear have an option to pursue directly ahead. Remember, I mentioned that if they were contacted on the side, when they rout, they aren't routed, they're just destroyed, but the pursuers still have the option to pursue at this point, and but they have to go straight ahead. No wheeling. The following additional rules apply. Battle wagons, artillery, camps, or troops behind obstacles never pursue. Devastating chargers and charging lancers must pursue. All other pursuits, including optional, may be stopped after 2 base widths for cavalry and 1 base width for infantry by playing a command card. Foot missile-focused troops can always choose not to pursue. Foot may always choose not to pursue mounted or chariots. Pursuing tugs that contact enemy SUGs in good going, destroy them, and continue their pursuit. You can't run away from a pursuit. If they make contact, they're destroyed. Pursuit move is a normal move distance without a variable movement roll. Pursuers wheel and or turn in whatever combination moves takes them as close to possible as the broken enemy. Pursuit stops if and when it meets friends it cannot get around using the 1/2 base width shift. Meets an enemy, you don't just fly through the enemy. Meets a table edge, you don't run off the table. It meets terrain that would make it affected or badly affected unless it chooses to enter. If any unbroken other enemy are met, they run away or skirmish as if charged and do not shoot. If a new enemy is contacted, fight another charge immediately. Okay, if this has occurred during a charge phase, fight another charge immediately. Otherwise, fight in the next charge phase. Okay, so back to our example. Let's say both of these burst through this unit and they're completely gone. And this guy is forced to pursue, which he is. So he pursues up to 3 base widths. He makes contact with his next enemy. If this was the charge phase and the Gauls charged in and destroyed them, they make their pursuit move, they make contact, that's considered another charge. And you fight it immediately. But if you go through the turn and you're going through all the motions and you get to a melee phase where the Romans and the Gauls are in contact and the Gauls destroy the Gauls destroy the Romans, They make their pursuit move, they make the contact, but we're not in the charge phase. So you don't fight a charge immediately. You wait till the next charge phase, and it's basically you treat it as if they were charged. So you don't fight charges out of the charge phase. You fight it in the next charge phase. Well, I hope that explains routes and pursuits. Pretty straightforward. All right, we're going to split this video in half, and we're going to go to the next step, which is 9.8, which is KaB tests and recovering from wounds. Well, we saw a KaB test here. Let's talk about it. Morale and lost bases. Morale in MeG is represented by the reduction of the number of bases in an UG. This isn't just casualties, but rather a loss of cohesion and morale, the general debilitation of the fighting force until it breaks. In some games, you'll see where they'll put tokens behind units. They don't actually pull the base off. They just put markers and it builds up until it reaches your breakpoint or whatever. In this game, you actually pull the base off, which represents its reduction in its fighting capability. Major rallying effects are only taken into account in the campaign rules. Relatively little rallying ever occurred in a battle, and it simply slows the game down. Bases are killed in 3 ways: shooting, combat, and kill a base. A kill a base covers a range of different situations where the fighting cohesiveness of troops might suffer without losing casualties. In short, it reflects indirect morale effects. The only rallying that occurs during a game is more minor and in an attempt to hold troops close to breaking. Command cards can be used by nearby generals to recover wounds in the end of turn phase as a prompted action. Okay, kill a base test should be a chart I'm going to put on the screen right there so you can see it, and we'll talk about it. Reasons to test. 1. Killing a general. Test an UG in line of command within 2 base widths, 6 base widths if legendary. When do you test? Immediate. So if a general dies, everybody within 2 base widths, you got to roll. 2. Destroying a tug. Test all UGs within 3 base widths. Enemy UG being burst through. 2 tests if greater than 3 files bursting through. Number 4. Enemy tug stopped at the table edge after a runaway or skirmish response. So if they do a runaway or skirmish and they collide with the wall, which is called the table edge, they have to make a KaB test. Enemy break off with KaB noted on action table. Okay, when I say enemy, because what this is the way it's worded is, I'm making the KaB test on you. Not you are not making a KaB test on yourself. So the way it's worded is kind of a little tricky. You can roll. I mean, I don't, as a player, I'd be like, okay, make a KaB test. But the way it's kind of worded is, I forced you to make a KaB test. Enemy general voluntarily leaving a combat. So, like, I'm the player, I am a player, you are a player, you're my enemy, but you choose to leave. I make you do a KaB test. Sacked enemy camp. Double test if over 8 bases. So, yeah, so if I've got over 8 bases sacking a camp, then you make 2 tests. Okay, what dice do you roll? Elephants and battle wagons are white, independent of quality, so they'll always roll a white die. Others dice according to their quality: poor, average, superior, or exceptional. So, exceptional wants to roll a white die because there are no skulls. Upgrade dice if testing for a loss of an army commander or breaking, destroying elephants. Upgrade dice if testing for loss of an army commander or breaking, destroying elephants. Okay, so what they're talking about there is, let's just say this is an elephant, right? This unit gets destroyed. Boom. Remember, when a unit is broken or routed, everybody within 2 base widths, 3 base widths. So everybody within 3 base widths have to make a break test, or I'm sorry, a KaB test. But because that tug, because any tug that's destroyed is a 3 base width, but because that unit was an elephant, you upgrade the die by 1. Skull removes a base. X adds a wound. And S is a 1 base width slowdown. So a KaB test can actually slow you down. Basically, you're kind of disordered. You're trying to reform, reorganize. So kill a base test can be performed on generals. Reason to test a general: 1, causing a base loss on a file with an enemy general fighting in the front rank. Okay, so if you're fighting me and your general is in the front rank and I kill a base in that file, remember, normally bases are taken from the front rank, but a general's not actually the unit, he's just the general. But in that case, you still have to do a KaB test. If you break a tug by combat, that has an enemy general with it. So there's 2 chances for that general to KaB test. The dice roll are 2, 3, 4, and 5. Dice according to general's current card allowance. So it's not their quality, it's their card allowance. Your card allowance is equal to your quality at the start of the game, but as the game progresses, your card allowance can go down if the general takes wounds, because a wound reduces the card allowance. And it's the current card allowance. Result: Skull is a dead general. Sword and Arrow is a wounded general, and an S is a stunned general. Stunned means you discard all the cards in that general's hand. Kill a base test. This is how you deal with 2 issues: the spread of negative morale effects, where we test UGs in situations that might cause morale degradation. The risk to a general when there is a chance they may be killed or wounded. You can claim a KaB test on an enemy UG and generals as shown on the KaB table, which we just looked at. KaB tests on UGs are immediate should any of the following happen. We went over all these. If you kill an enemy general, you get a KaB test and all enemy UGs in line of command within 2 base widths, or 6 base widths if it's a legendary general. Allies are not under the same command. If enemy burst through each other in a way that causes KaB tests, if more than 3 files pass through an enemy as a single action, you get a double KaB test. If a tug is making a runaway or skirmish move and meets the rear table edge, okay, we already talked about that. If you push an enemy, KaBs for routes all occur at the end of the current phase. So if you break an enemy tug, you get a roll on every enemy UG within 3 base widths at the end of the current phase. This could be the charge phase, the shooting phase, the fighting phase, or the end of turn phase. Breaking SUGs does not cause a KaB test, even on SUGs. Everyone is used to seeing them run away. Any tugs broken by these tests themselves cause further tests. So you could see a chain, like he breaks, causes KaB tests on everybody around him. This guy loses a wound, which breaks him, causing KaB tests on everybody around him. He rolls, gets a wound, which breaks him, causes a KaB test. It could go all the way down the line. But that's only if you're that close to your army breaking anyway. Okay, I'm going to double check the testing a general. Roll a death die with the color depending on the current card allowance. A skull kills a general, treat them as dead. This gives a KaB test on the UGs within 2 base widths, or 6. Oh, it says, okay, let me back up. It says, he keeps his cards, place these near the camp or center of the table with the dead base on top of them. Prior to replacement arriving, the cards can be used paying an extra colored card as if for out of command. Sword and arrow wounds the general. Drop 1 card number to a minimum of 2 for the rest of the game. If the general is currently at 2 cards, treat him as stunned. Oh, okay. Stunned. The general knocks him out for a time. He must discard any cards he has remaining. Okay, so only a stun actually drops all your cards, unless your general is already down to only 2 cards. If a general survives such a test, then... If a general survives such a test when he is with a broken UG, he immediately gets a free move to get away from the ensuing rout. Okay. Pretty smooth. Recovering wounds. And remember, wounds are more than really wounds. It's also kind of morale. Generals can hold together troops under pressure by recovering wounds, if they are nearby and have the command cards to do so, representing them urging the troops and ignore the damage they are taking. In turn sequence 6.1, you can remove a wound from an UG using command cards from a general within 4 base widths. Play red, remove a wound from an UG that is in combat. Play a yellow or red to remove a wound from an UG that is not in combat. A general can use his upgrade once for the phase if he is with the UG being recovered. Alright, and that was it for kill-a-base tests and recovering wounds. Just to summarize, kill-a-base test is usually happening when a rout bursts through your friends, bursts through yourself. That's a kill-a-base test. when the general is in the front rank and you lose somebody in that rank or that file, kill a base test on the general. When a unit is destroyed, everybody within 3 has to kill a base test. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, there are some other ones, like if you voluntarily leave or KaB test and stuff, but those are going to be the main ones. And recovery is, if you're trying to remove a wound from somebody in combat, play a red card. If you're trying to remove a wound from somebody out of combat, it's yellow or red. If you're with the unit, you can upgrade it. You can always upgrade a card once per phase. Now, I'm starting to kind of get the impression that, this is going to be just a little anecdote real quick, off subject. I'm starting to get the impression that your command has a general ahead of it, right? Obviously. You're probably going to have 2 or 3 commands. Let's just say you've got 3 commands and 3 generals, right? Like a Romans, and a floating army commander. So you got each one of those is going to be drawing cards. So each command is going to have somewhere around 4 cards. There's multiple phases. There's the charge phase. There's the movement phase. There's the melee. There's the shooting. There's a whole bunch of phases. And there's going to be requirements to play cards on units. And in one command, remember, I'm just picking 3 commands out, you might have 4 or 5 tugs, maybe a SUG or some cavalry. So theoretically, you might have like 6 tugs or 6 units in your command with a general that only has 4 cards. And you're going to have multiple phases to play cards. So the idea is you're never going to have enough cards. Alright, so in the next video, we're going to be jumping to 9.9, which is camps. And we're going to be almost complete with the chapter 9. Alright, thanks for coming out and checking this out, and I'll see you in the next one.